Hey everybody, welcome to another video on the channel. Today we have a little bit of a longer one because it's a case review. This is the Corsair 2000D Airflow. This is the iCUE version, and as you can see, this is also the white mesh version. So this is white, obviously it's covered in mesh. So the front panel has two USB 3.0 A's, a USB-C, standard microphone, headphone jack combo, reset button, power button. Pretty good. Looks pretty nice. Let's peel that off. Yeah, there you go. The entire case is covered in this sort of triangular mesh. Really like the look of it. This case, as you might notice, is a little bit bigger than a lot of the micro 8 or mini ITX builds that you might see out there. And it's basically a completely skinnable case. Here you can see on the top, this is where the power supply goes. On the top, yeah, very weird. A lot of the mini ITX builds are doing this. They just put the power supply wherever they can find room. So that's where it goes. We'll see how that hooks up in a bit. Looking down the back, big fan filter here. And also all of the side panels are attached with these little sort of pseudo removable screws. Just this big panel in the back just slides straight out. You'll see that later. Down here at the bottom, this is where all the cables go through for your rear panel stuff. And case sides pop off with these little knobby things like that. Yeah, you can see they all just have these little dimples. So looking at the front with the panel off, you can see we got 320 millimeter fans up front that are provided by Corsair. These are the fancy iCUE enabled RGB fans, so we'll get a look at that in a minute. Here's that sweet fan filter on the back that you just slide all the way off. The back here gets you two 120 millimeter fan slots as well if you have a thin graphics card. We'll get to that in a minute. Basically, if you can put two fans back here, if your graphics card is thin enough. Otherwise, you're basically just using this area for airflow to your graphics card. Moving around to the side panel, this thing is removable, and you can put either two 140 millimeter fans there at the bottom or three 120s up the side. And look at all of these panels that you take off when you build in this case. So you just skin it. Now it's just an exoskeleton. So we got our standard power reset and LED switches and standard HD audio jacks in the front. We also have a plug for that USB-C connector there. That's pretty standard. And then we have the two USB-A 3.0 with its standard connector. So nothing too crazy up front. So here, first and foremost, you can see this first circuit board here on the left. That's a RGB hub, which is effectively the iCUE controller. All these friggin' wires here go to the fans on the front. It's a little bit of a nightmare. It's controlled via USB, and then it also has a SATA power connector there that hooks all that up. Underneath that is a fan controller, which they call it a fan controller. Really, it's just a fan port multiplier because it just shares the same fan controls. It also runs on a SATA power, and then there's your power management plug for that. It's down there. It's kind of hard to get to. Kind of sucks to put fans into. I was not happy about that situation. So here we can put three SSDs. You got one here with this little quick change thing. I'm missing the second one. I have no idea where it went. It goes right there. Don't know. But that's okay. We'll handle that later. And then there's a third SSD slot that you have to stick down here if you have a third one. It's basically a real consolation prize. It is not great. Yeah. Here's where the motherboard goes. Pretty standard mini ITX rather. I keep saying micro. Mini ITX motherboard, 3 expansion slots in case your graphics card is a wide boy. And this is where all your cables go through to the back. We'll get a look at that in a minute. Basically, yeah, that's where all the cables for the rear of the motherboard goes. It's kind of a strange case in that you pretty much don't have an I/O panel or anything. It all gets jammed inside there. Corsair does give you some sweet zip ties and some bolts, like literally every other case on human existence at this point. So you know what bolts look like. I don't need to show you. Power supply drops straight in. No problem with the installation there. Jumping right into the build. The only thing that you have to worry about is this cable here. Remember that little guy? He's a right angle cable, and make sure you put the power supply in the right way so that lines up. I did that wrong, and it did not go well. I had to fix that later, off camera. Very, very unpleasant. Motherboard installs. You know what a motherboard's what a motherboard installation looks like. This is an Asus Strix motherboard for my my Intel my Core i7. Yeah, it's an older motherboard, but it was the one that I had available for the stuff I had on hand. So works, installs real easy, plenty of room. Hard drives also install real easily. I actually stole a second quick change hard drive mount from my old case. So that's if you have a Corsair case or another case that uses those mounts, give it a shot if you're missing yours. I was pretty disappointed I was missing the second one of mine. Cable management in every mini ITX build, always a problem. This particular part behind the power supply is an actual nightmare, and it only gets worse as this build goes on. I just didn't have a good place to put all these wires, and it's right up against the motherboard, so you're kind of just, you're kind of just shoving those cables wherever they go. Yeah, see how it's just kind of jammed in there behind the RAM? Not ideal, but it's not horrible. Graphics card goes in pretty easily. Mine's a 2-slotter, and I barely have room to put my hand in here, so understand that if you have a 1-slot graphics card, you could put fans here, but otherwise, not happening. And there's a good look at where all the cables go to the motherboard. Pretty weird, but it works. Yeah. So here we are just trying to wedge some cables in. This worked okay. Many mistakes were made in cabling and cable running. I left everything untied until the very end, other than all of those RGB wires for the fans, because honestly, building in this case is, while it's larger, you still have all of the mini ITX problems where there's just a lot of weird access issues. Cables need to go wherever cables are going to go, and you're going to struggle a lot. And so now we're adding this PCI Express wire to this already absolutely nightmarish setup, and now you can see it is real tight, and we've got all these cables. There's just, if you have a longer power supply than what I used, I don't know that you should use this case, because honestly, there's really not a good you could pull them over through that hole over there on the side, but bending them is really hard. Another problem here too is that all of these fan connector cables are just kind of nightmarish, and they're really hard to manage, and they're all stuck up here because of course the fan controller, the RGB controller are all jammed in that corner. Didn't like that at all. I was pretty pissed about it. But now we're testing out the actual capacity of this case. This is a 3 by 120 millimeter AIO like CPU cooler. It is huge, and yeah, because the side where you mount these fans is removable, we can do that. Look at this. Boom. You can actually mount a radiator this large into the side with 3 fans, 3 120s. Yeah, it totally works. The neat thing about it too is that you can basically like take this in and out because this whole panel is just removable. So I did like that. I think the big thing that people would probably ask about this case is like it's tall, right? Obviously you can tell it's really tall. So who would even want this? Because it's a mini ITX build, but the case is kind of huge for a mini ITX. It's like, well, if you have need for a lot of radiators, it's a little more comfortable to work in than some other mini ITX builds. But yeah, it fits a whole 3 by 120 radiator. And here's a look at how you access all of those cable plugs underneath the case, and then the wires just go out through that side panel that I showed you before. Kind of strange, but it sort of works. You really need to make sure that you don't have cables that are too long, though. That was a huge problem. But yeah, not too bad. I did have one complaint overall with this case that was, I mean, you know, it's not terrible, but it's definitely something to consider. You have a lot of cables running through a tiny hole, and it gets a little insane. Also, Corsair decided that it was a great idea to use that RGB hub. My motherboard does not have a USB header, old 2.0 header, so that's something to consider. Those RGB hubs are USB 2.0. So I had to get this. Yes, look at it. It is literally two USB-A plugs with a header on the other side, so you can then plug this in. And when you plug it in, oh buddy, look at that. There's the RGB fans. You can run them in all kinds of colors. You can see they all have these big, like 8 LEDs on the inside. They're very fancy. Let's just cycle through some crazy stuff you can do. This is all controlled through Corsair's iCUE software. If you're not familiar with it, I might be able to do an overview of it in the future, although it's a pretty simple system. You pick colors and you send them to the fans. You set the fans up for what order they're in, and then you can do crazy stuff like cycling the fans together like this, or, picking a solid color, or whatever you want to do. You can do phase shift. You can do some rainbow stuff. I mean, just any old thing you want. It's pretty sweet. If that's your thing. If it's not, get the other version of this case that doesn't have any of the RGB stuff, and you can just put normal fans in it. The one complaint I do have is that they packed this case full of fans, which is great, but the problem is that they used all of those like cable. You can see the cable management, or like the cable protector screens on the inside of the fans. They're super loud, and taking those off makes a world of difference in terms of air noise. But yeah, so here's the case in its final state, just sitting on my desk, or on my side filing cabinet thing. It looks great. I think it looks cool, personally. Big fan of it. It just works. I'm gonna keep this around for a while, I think. Yeah. I don't really have much to say about it. It's a case you can build a system in it pretty easily. It's a little bit larger than normal mini ITX builds, but I don't know that you need to know anything else about it, really. Like, it's a little difficult to build in, but that's a mini ITX build for you. It's way bigger. It's like a full tower mini ITX. If that appeals to you, great. If not, well, you watched the video this long, so thanks for watching. Have a good one.